So I'm Marit Stiles. I'm the leader of the official opposition NDP. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm here at Queen's Park to talk about a very urgent and important issue. I am joined by our MPP for Thunder Bay Superior North, Lise Vaugeois. I'm also joined by MPP Sol Mamakwa from Kiiwetinoong, who is joining us at the side of the road. Thanks to technology. and last but certainly not least, I'm being joined by Mark Belanger, a fire management technician here to speak on behalf of fire workers in this province. Really looking forward to hearing what Mark has to say. So everybody, as I mentioned again, I'm Marit Stiles and I'm the leader of Ontario's official opposition NDP. I'm joining you from Queen's Park. We haven't even hit August this year, and already the 2023 wildfire season has shattered records. Canadian wildfires have already burned an area larger than Lake Ontario, Erie, and Michigan, like all those Great Lakes combined. 65 forest fires are still burning across Ontario, many out of control. And even as we gather here today, there are forests that are burning. Make no mistake, this is the climate crisis in action. Drier conditions, hotter days. It's really alarming that the Doug Ford Conservatives refuse to make this connection. Forest fire crews have been doing incredibly difficult work this summer to keep all of us safe. And we owe an enormous debt of gratitude to everyone who works on these crews, from the firefighters and the pilots to the logistics staff and the warehouse workers and the engineers. Your hard work has not gone unnoticed. But that work is being made so much more difficult when workers are not being respected by this government with fair wages and fair working conditions. When fire workers aren't supported, it's hard to recruit. And that has serious consequences for future summers when we need people with the experience and the knowledge to lead our fire crews and keep us safe. Doug Ford's policy decisions to cut funding for fire crews are going to have dire consequences at a time when fire seasons are only going to get worse, and it doesn't need to be this way. Today, I'm calling on Ford to reverse his cuts to forest fire crews and ensure that our fire workers receive fair compensation for the vital work they're doing. I call on him and his government to increase the amount of permanent, full-time positions to ensure that workers get benefits, healthcare, and danger pay for working in these hazardous conditions. When we take climate crisis seriously, we implement better policy. We support the workers who are fighting for us, and we ensure that everyone is kept safe from wildfires, both the brave fire workers who are fighting them back and the communities they protect. And it's really the least we can do to support them. So with that, I'm going to turn this over now to our wonderful MPP from Thunder Bay Superior North, who has really been on the front line in this issue, MPP Lise Vaugeois. Over to you, Lise.
Thank you very much, Marit. I think we need to remember that this is the same government that cut 700 renewable energy projects. So there has been really climate change denial. And we heard it earlier in the legislature when Ford said, okay, folks, it's just a normal fire season like every year. Just look after your campfires. And well, there might be a few extra lightning strikes we have to watch out for. I mean, it was really, I'm going to say, a foolish thing to say, because it denies the reality of what we're actually dealing with, which is climate change and dramatic changes in what is happening in our environment. And we see this especially in the north. But it affects the entire province, as we know, because the smoke was in Toronto and people really noticed that. The concern is that there's been such an obsession with cutting the public service in this government. And we see that firefighting crews, firefighting crews, first of all, they've lost so many of their senior personnel because the wages aren't enough, because they're paying rent in more than one place. They're paying their own travel expenses. Often they're not even making money when they're here, and it's extremely dangerous. So where there used to be full-time positions for firefighters, those barely exist now for forest fire workers. So there's a retention problem, and we know that there was a 67% cut to that to the budget, and so we're short 50 firefighter fighting crews, which is 120 to 150 people, and because there are not enough crews, then the government's had to import firefighters from Mexico. Well, that's great that they're available. Thank goodness they're available. But I really ask myself, how much is that costing? And why would we spend the money there instead of supporting workers who then will stay in the positions, bring the experience from year to year to those positions, and not have 20-year-old new fire workers having to be responsible as crew leaders? That is absurd and dangerous and very unfair. And the same workers are not getting the same protections under WSIB either, for the contaminants that they're breathing while doing this extremely important work. So I think from there, I will pass this on now to Sol Mamakwa, our MPP from Kiiwetinoong.
Miigwech, Lise, thank you. Certainly, I think in the far northern Ontario, we know the climate crisis is real. We're always the first people to feel the impacts of the climate crisis in the north, whether it's wintertime, whether it's springtime, and especially in the summer. I know last month, I was going to different fly-in First Nations, and it was just covered in smoke. It's like, the whole north is on fire. Mm-hmm. We know that Ontario was on fire. We know that across Canada was on fire. And I think soon after that, you started seeing some of the camps that First Nations have, individuals have, they burnt because there was no protection. They're not given the resources to be able to protect their camps. These camps are important because they provide us a way of life of who we are as First Nations people. And when you do not protect that, you're not protecting our ways of life, our identity, our languages, because our identities come from the language. And the north is on fire. It's like, and then I listened to, from a few days ago, I listened to a couple of the Noah Friedman from Sol Lookout and also Taylor from Pickle Lake. And, I said, I do a shout out to them for the work that they do. It's like, it's like they're working, a job from hell. And because there's so much fire around them, and that the way they're treated is so unfair. And I think that's important to acknowledge the work that the forest fire workers are doing, the firefighters themselves, but also the admin people. It's so important, the work that they do, because they protect, again, the people, the north, and when you don't even, when they're short workers. And I think what I've been saying this for years too is the underutilization of First Nations people that in these fires. I remember a fire, I think it was last year or earlier this year, but this First Nation had 37 firefighters, and they were never utilized. These are our lands. These are our traditional territories. These are our hunting grounds. We know best on how the fire will act. We know best on how, to protect these camps, these lands. And we know and we don't even utilize them. However, the government just continues to import international force firefighters. But we are here. We will continue to be here, but we're not being utilized. We must do better. We got to do better. Be good. I'll pass it on to Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Mark Belanger, president of OPSEU Local 713, and I'm a 30-year fire suppression veteran. The province wildfire organization is in crisis and forest is burning. This year, we are 50 crews short because we can't retain enough experienced staff to lead crews. We're no longer capable of providing effective and timely fire response and can no longer claim to be leaders in boreal suppression. This is a life and death situation, and it's getting worse. When I started Aviation, Forest Fire and Emergency Service, we had 5-person crews that could have as much as 20 years experience per person and worked equivalent to full time. That's 100 years of combined experience. Now we have 4 persons, many of them students, with as little as 5 seasons combined experience, who with that time may have worked anywhere from 0 to 6 weeks per season on actual fires. We have lost as much as 95 years experience at the crew level. What remains is concentrated in a transient workforce. You've been told that we're staffed at above 80%, but we're lacking trained and capable leadership and supervision as required under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. In some places, there have been more than 30% loss in frontline leadership. Without a reasonable wage exchange for workplace hazards and challenges faced, you cannot retain a skilled workforce. A crew leader makes about $17,000 in a 6-month season. None receive any isolation or danger pay or standby pay for when they're out on fire assignments and in the bush. Without at least 100 hours of overtime, they can't even recoup the costs of fighting fire. In a slow year, the staff underwrite program delivery in rent that they have to pay to live on bases. This workforce is recognized talent by all but the province. I've personally provided more than 20 references to individuals who have gone on to better job opportunities that allow them to support their families. Even entry-level positions in other ministries that have similar deliverables pay between $12,000 and $16,000 a year more. It takes a minimum of 7 years to become a proficient crew leader and a supervisor. The required knowledge can't be taught. It's specifically experience-based. When we draw students from 2- and 4-year programs to come fight fires, but then don't provide job opportunities or hope for the future, it's easy to see how we fail to retain them or get those 7 years experience. We need experienced people to lead crews, but if people aren't willing to stay in the job, we lose all of those years of experience and we can't form enough crews. This is a problem that compounds year after year. The military and foreign crews don't fix the problem either. They can only be used in very specific, low-risk assignments. Less crews translates directly to larger fires and greater impacts on human life, values, and resources. This affects Indigenous communities most, with extended evacuations from their homes and traditional lands. In 2023, it's been the worst fire year in 15 years. The most fires and the largest amount of hectares burnt in 25 years. The climate crisis is making this work. We're calling on the Ford government to take action and support forest fire workers now. These professionals are the only workforce allowed to fly in restricted airspace over wildfires, the only provincial workforce qualified to exit and unload helicopters in hover exits and routinely engage in high-risk helicopter flights and activities. They will work in fire and smoke up to 16 hours a day and are constantly exposed to carcinogens in the air they breathe and the clothing that they wear. They're a workforce of professionals who engage in dangerous and demanding emergency service work. Even off hours on fires, they risk contact with dangerous and unpredictable wildlife, such as bears and wolves. We are 7 years beyond the tipping point, and it's only going to get worse. This means greater risk of serious incidents and injuries. This year in Canada, we've already had 3 fatalities. This is what's coming our way. To have any chance of restoring a capable response program, we need immediate action from the province to recognize jobs that forest firefighters are doing, including the valued service they provide, the incredible dangers they face, and to retain them by paying them appropriately. Our members are organizing to take action, and we need specific public support. Please go to ontarioisburning.ca and send a message to your MPP, the Minister and Premier Ford, to take action now. Thank you for an opportunity to speak today, and back to you, Mayor.
Thanks so much, Mark, and thank you, Lise and Sol. Yeah, so you heard it here. The North is burning. The North is burning. It's on fire. The forests across this province are on fire, and we have to get the Ford Conservative government to treat this as the urgent crisis it is and take action now. And as you heard here as well, there are solutions, right? We need to reverse the funding cuts. We need to offer higher wages. Mark, you might want to correct me on this, but my understanding is forest fire workers in this province have only seen a 1% increase in like 15 years. It's outrageous. Yeah,
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct, right? Okay, and we need more permanent jobs. You heard it here. The Ford Conservatives and the governments before them have turned a highly skilled, experienced workforce into a precarious workforce where we cannot retain and recruit people. A workforce that is clearly working in extremely dangerous and complicated situations, and yet most of them don't even qualify for danger pay. We need more permanent jobs. We need danger pay. We need to acknowledge the danger right now and treat it with the urgency that it requires. And, we also need to take climate change seriously. So with that, I think we're all happy to take your questions. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to thank all the journalists for joining. You guys can use the raise the hand function for your questions. We're going to allow one question and one follow-up. Please state your name and your outlet, and we'll begin now. I'm going to start with Alan Hale. Marit, he's going to speak to you just now. 1 second.
Hi, Alan.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so I was hoping Mark could tell us a little bit about how these apparent budget cuts have rolled out. How long have they been coming, and what has the impact been year over year on the capabilities of like fire response?
I don't know if we've lost Mark temporarily here. I don't see him. So we may have to get back to you on that, Alan, when we get him back on.
Okay. My questions are fairly like technical about fire.
Okay.
So I don't really have a lot of else without Mark to ask.
Gotcha. So we're working to get him back on, I think.
Okay, thank you, Alan. We're going to circle back around to you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to Siobhan.
Similarly, I also had a question for Mark, but Marit, I did have a question for you on an unrelated subject, if I may.
Okay. Sure.
So we saw this in the ONA arbitration decision last week, this real highlight of the over-reliance on agency nursing and some numbers attached to it. What's the problem with this kind of explosion in the use of agency nursing in your view, and what ought the government do about it?
So the solution is to pay nurses a decent wage, and not just nurses, all healthcare workers, right? We are seeing a crisis in our hospitals, which is a human resource crisis. We've been sounding the alarm about this for most of this last year, if not longer, saying what's happening right now is we're seeing underpaid, disrespected healthcare workers, including nurses, who are leaving the healthcare system in droves. Much faster than they can be recruited or or trained. And why are they going to the private agencies? Because they will not only pay them better, but give them, more flexibility in terms of their work hours and a better work environment. And we've also been noting that they're paying, 10 times, 200 times as much through the hospitals are relying, because hospitals are having to rely on these temporary nursing agencies. I've heard from hospital CEOs that this is a crisis, that they cannot continue to do this. It's costing our healthcare system more. The answer is very clear. The answer is we need to start to show respect. The government needs to stop fighting to keep healthcare workers' wages down with Bill 124. It was a massive mistake. I can't believe they still haven't gotten the message on that one, that they continue to fight it. They know the writing's on the wall. Obviously, they're going to have to pay healthcare workers more and a decent wage. But in a way, and not to draw the comparison too much, but like to our forest fire workers, right? You keep disrespecting them. You keep treating them badly. People who are actually, doing the work, the so-called the people that this government calls our frontline heroes, and we're driving them away. And the cost, literally, will be more. Mark made that point about the forest fire workers, right? How much more does it cost us to continue to just throw these solutions together, bring in international firefighters? What would it mean to actually train and hire First Nations people, as Sol said, folks living in First Nations communities, or actually pay forest fire workers a decent wage? This is no solution. And the government of Doug Ford and his conservative government, show again and again that they do not understand, they refuse to do what's necessary. I heard a fire worker say this weekend when we were talking that that this is a government that pretends to not understand why or how to fix the problems. But the solutions are right there. Everybody has told them what the solution is to the healthcare crisis. Everyone has told them what the solution is to the forest fire crisis. They are making a conscious decision not to go there. And it's, in fact, in the healthcare system, Siobhan, what I believe very strongly is that this government is intentionally underfunding our healthcare system so that they can drive more work to the private sector.
Siobhan, we have Mark back on the line. If you want to direct your follow-up to him, that'd be great.
Sure. Mark, my question was, if you said, it takes about 7 years to train a leader, if by some, magic stroke, we did have more funding, could you realistically really staff up in the way that you think is necessary?
Thanks. Great question. You can staff up, but you can't get the experience. When we talk about the job being experience-based, for you to be able to get the knowledge and the situational awareness that is specific to the firefighting environment, you need to have those years on the ground. And remember, firefighting is only done in the summer. So we're cutting a year and a half, and then we're dealing specifically with what Mother Nature gives us. We only really gain viable situational awareness by fighting fire in our own forests, in the boreal forest in Ontario. We can't claim to get that knowledge and experience by exporting to other provinces as we do to assist them. So when we see what Mother Nature gives us, some years like this year, we can do fairly well, but then again, we don't have the manpower that are here actively learning. Last year in 2022, it was such a poor year that there were firefighters that I've spoken to who made only 1/2 an hour overtime in that year. So their exposure to actually doing the job was nil to non-existent. And the employer can't claim to have a training program that prepares the individual for firefighting, because under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, you have to be both trained and capable. The only way you can get the capabilities is by developing the situational awareness, which is the only way that occurs is through on the ground actually experiencing fire. So there's really 7 years is the only way to do it. And we would have to have that influx of people today and start today. And it's simply, with this government, it's not going to happen.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to go to Alan Hale. Alan, I believe, has a question for you as well.
Hi, Mark. I was just wondering if you could sort of give us an idea of how these budget cuts were rolled out and like what things were cut over the years that we've gotten to this point. Has this been like a gradual thing? Has this been something that started with the PCs? Like, can you give us an idea of what has happened to the budget and like what has the impact been to get us to this today?
Thanks, Alan. Yes, I can give you the single best example, and that is in the early 90s, a foundation decision that was made that affects us to this day was to drop the 5-man crew concept. The provincial firefighting, the response system was based on a 5-person crew operating 2,400 feet of hose, understanding that fires statistically occurred within 2,400 feet of a water source in Ontario. 5 people gave you an opportunity to have two-person crews do either flank of the fire while you had a crew leader doing the scouting and recce, giving them information. When the province decided to cut down to 4 persons, what they did is they eliminated the ability to work as a two-person team and have the safety of somebody overviewing the situation, which then meant that 4 people were now doing the work of 5, and the expectation remained of the government that you would still make the same headway with 1 less person to do the very, very physically demanding job of laying the hose, cutting line, and everything else. So one of the foundation decisions has been the reduction from 5-person crews to 4-person crews, and that has very much affected us. There have been other restrictions over the years, but that is a foundation piece that affects us to this day. And coincidentally, if you listen to some of the government individuals speaking, they will talk about how we have a better response program this year because we even have 5- and 6-person crews. I find it very interesting that what they're doing is saying that in essence, they have the best deal now with 5-person crews when they eliminated that opportunity to effectively fight fire many years ago. So it's kind of like doublespeak.
My next question is, you mentioned that a crew leader makes $17,000 in a season. How long is a season? Is that really the only money they make during the year?
Okay, so the 17,000 is that's an average. That's what a crew leader makes. A crew boss or senior crewman makes less than that, and a crewman makes less than that. Their contracts are set up based on the position. So typically, a crewman will have a 3.5, 4-month contract. A senior crewman will have a 4 to 5 month contract, and a crew leader will have a 5 to 6 month contract. Now, these are basic Group 3 contracts and extended with emergency funding as they can, but that is sort of the base take-home pay for the crew leader. The crew bosses and the crewmen get less than that. Now, they do not receive any hazard pay. They do not receive any isolation pay. They very, very, very rarely will receive any type of standby or on-call pay. That's usually kept for people higher in the suppression chain of command. And the only other pay that they will get, besides, for example, meal allowances if they're, out on a fire and they come in after a certain time, is the overtime that they make based on time past 8 hours a day. So there's a very narrow actual income range, and it isn't very high.
Thank you. We're going to go to Jack Howland from the Trillium.
Hi there, can you hear me now? Hi. I was just wondering how much more the province is paying these foreign crews, if you know.
Sorry, was that directed to me?
Whoever knows the answer.
Okay. Foreign crews, when they come in, there's a standard sort of price list, a menu, if you will, for what foreign crews are paid. This is negotiated and established, and I believe is available through SIFSI if you would request it. But it's always classed by the training and capabilities of the individual that you're hiring. So if you're hiring a crew person, you're being paid this amount of money, crew boss, crew leader, sector boss, division supervisor, things like that. So the pays are sort of pre-calculated, if you will.
Okay, sorry, what was that thing you mentioned, SIPSI?
Yes, the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. And as my follow-up, are forest firefighters allowed to strike, and is that something that's on the table if your demands aren't met?
We are allowed to strike, but only in relation to contract negotiation periods. We cannot wildcat. And we have a certain amount of emergency response coverage that is negotiated during each subsequent wage negotiation period. And those numbers have to be provided to maintain minimum expected emergency service coverage for the province.
We're going to go to Matthew from Radio Canada.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Well, first of all, I'm just curious to know if Mark speaks French.
Oui, monsieur, je parle français, mais j'ai pas trop de vocabulaire, donc ça serait plus facile pour moi de faire ça en anglais.
OK, mais peut-être juste une réponse générale sur l'impact pour le recrutement puis pour la rétention des pompiers, le fait d'avoir des conditions de travail qui ne sont pas vraiment optimales.
OK, je vais essayer. Vas-y.
OK, ben c'est ça, juste de manière générale, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire pour vous, pour le recrutement, pour la rétention de personnel?
Alors, pour nous autres, le recrutement, c'est un cause basse. Si on n'a pas un bon recrutement, ça va nous affecter dans le futur. Puis c'est pas quelque chose qui peut être réglé dans une journée, c'est quelque chose qu'il faut que ça soit développé. C'est pour ça que je dis notre problème, c'est pas qu'on rentre dans une période de 7 ans, on est dans la période de 7 ans parce que le gouvernement n'a pas fait rien pour trouver une solution. Puis ça fait qu'aujourd'hui, on est dans des problèmes qu'on est.
Merci beaucoup. And my next question is for Marit on a different topic. Marit, business and municipal leaders are urging the province to stop postponing the property assessment. They say the province is making tax less predictable. Just want to get your reaction on this. Do you think the government should keep postponing, or what should we do with the property assessment?
Well, we called earlier this year, and we continue to call on the government to conduct a thorough investigation to get to the bottom of why we continue to see homes on the lower end assessed at such a high rate compared to homes on that higher end of the scale. Something is out of whack, and so we have asked for the government to thoroughly investigate that. I would say that, if we don't get to the bottom of that, we risk seeing a similar problem with assessments going forward. And I know we're not the only ones that have been calling that, because I believe the new mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, recently also asked for that investigation. So, I mean, that's where we stand. I understand the problem, but it's really unfair to so many people, especially on the lower end, with homes on the lower end that are being assessed at such a ridiculous rate, and people who are very wealthy seem to be getting away with paying a whole lot less.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to go over to Sergio.
Thank you very much. This question would be for our OPSEU speaker here. I'm reporting out of Northeastern Ontario here, so I'm wondering if where we're thankfully seeing most of our fires out or under control, I'm wondering if you would possibly be able to comment on the handling of this fire season here, and how different it would have looked if the fire program was properly funded.
Mark, I don't know if you heard that question.
I'm sorry, I only caught part of that. I was dealing with something else. Sorry, if you could please repeat the question.
Sure. So I'm just reporting with CTV out of Northeastern Ontario here, where thankfully we have most of our fires either put out or under control. I'm wondering if you would be able to comment on the handling of our fire season here and how different it would have looked if the fire program was properly funded as you'd like.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. So the largest impact that I can say right off the bat is if we had more trained and capable supervisors in the program, we would be able to field more complete crews. More complete crews means faster action and extinguishment of fires when they're found. The provincial fire strategy states that every fire gets an appropriate response. If the appropriate response is deemed suppression, then without the trained and capable supervision, we can't offer that. I've seen fires to this point, 5,000 hectare fires with 8 persons. That's 2 crews on them. So when you're dealing with putting crews on a fire, you're admitting that the fire requires suppression. If you're putting a minimum amount of people on that crew, you're not actually targeting extinguishment. You're targeting managing the direction it burns in. So it's not necessarily a full-on fire suppression. It's some other action. So the only way to effectively dig in on these fires and put them out is by having the supervision we need to field the maximum amount of crews that should be there to do the job. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up, would you mind painting a picture of how you feel this fire season or would have looked or future fire seasons will look if this program was properly funded?
If this program was properly funded, we could see a very different response program in the future. Looking at, for example, the fact that the fire program hasn't even looked at picking up the new 515 water bombers from Viking Air. Looking at the fact that, for example, last year we had several water bombers that were down due to mechanical errors. Looking at we have pilots that we're trying to fill pilots on aircraft within the ministry. We're trying to get all of the people that we need to staff up. If we had that, we would have a very robust program to assist with the suppression of fires and keep the people of Ontario safe, and specifically the people who suffer the most, which are our Indigenous communities in the far north. And with a more robust program, we can not only offer protection to the communities, but we can offer the training that the communities desire and need in order to be able to provide that protection for themselves, as Sol had mentioned.
Thank you, Mark. Our last question is going to come from Randy with 93.1 The Border.
Hey, Randy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry about that. First of all, Marit, you talked about international crews, and maybe Mark wants to weigh in this as well. Ontario has had a history of bringing in international crews. I recall one year where we saw hundreds of international firefighters come in when, more than what we've seen today. So can you just maybe talk a little bit more about your concern about the international crews and would we no longer need international crews if we came to a reasonable amount of fire crews in Ontario?
Hey, Randy, I'd be happy to answer that for you, or I'll take a stab at it. So we have a mutual support program with other provinces and other countries. And in an event of extreme fire behavior, we do maintain the agreement that we will go help them. But the interesting thing about the international crews is that we don't make an agreement that we will send crews out at the expense of our own system, and they do the same. So just because we need crews doesn't mean we're going to get crews. And the interesting thing about the crews that we receive is the crews that come in from other countries are not trained in the boreal forest environment. The classic example of this is our Mexican brother firefighters who are with us now. The Mexicans, for example, it's a requirement under their Occupational Health and Safety Act that they be given machetes to work in the bush, because in their equatorial environment, there's much more lush growth, and there are also animals like snakes that can be very deadly for them. So we have them up here, and they come with their machetes, but we don't issue machetes in the boreal forest because it's not a tool that's required. So we see the people that we're getting aren't necessarily the best trained for the job, but we get them anyway. It's good to have a mutual support system like this. However, when the government continually relies on it, we're no longer looking at a system that's being used effectively for what it was designed for. We're looking at a system that's being used to prop up the provincial government's refusal to fund the province in an adequate way in order to have a robust protection system for the people of Ontario. You can't save money, tell the people that you're protecting them, and keep going to the trough for foreign firefighters because they can say no at any time. Thank you.
Pertaining to our own Ontario crews, every year we never know what the fire season is going to be. You know, there's been times when April has been a terrible month, and then the rest of the year has been quiet. How do you qualify or justify having the adequate number of crews if you don't know what the forest fire season is going to be?
I might just start off on that one. I would say, first of all, you know, yes, we don't always know, but there is lots of information and data and experts out there who can help us to predict some of this. But at the end of the day, we know that it's getting consistently worse. So whether we have a better year next year or not, the year after that or the year after that, it's going to continue to get worse. We know that. And so once again, we have a government that just refuses to even invest in the minimum that we need. You know, we have a government that is pushing more and more of our firefighters, forest fire workers out of these full-time jobs and into a precarious employment. And, you know, it's not that different from other situations we dealt with, whether it's a public health emergency. Governments, and this isn't the first government to have done that, continue to look at things as they like, you know, pay for it when you need to, but when you really need it, it's very, very hard to bring in the level of experience that you need. And that's, I think, one of the most important points that Mark was making today, is we're losing that experience, that mentorship that's so critical if we're going to be able to also protect our forest fire workers, right? I mean, we've seen some real tragedies out west this year. And are we going to wait until we see those tragedies here? Or are we going to act now and make sure we don't see that happen? And Mark, I'll turn to you. I'm sure you have some things you'd like to add.
Thank you, Marit. Yes, when we talk about some of the issues in retaining these senior staff, when I spoke of those 20 individuals that I have given personal references to, every single one of them went on to $100,000 a year plus jobs, some in the province and some out of the province. So when you look at that type of wage discrepancy and understanding that there are so many people that are hiring from our pool because they realize the quality and training and individual that they're getting, it's really a question of why is it we can't even afford to give these people danger pay? Why is it we can't even afford to give these people isolation pay? Why is it we can't even afford to give these people standby pay when they're on a line? The dangers and the hazards that are inherent in this job don't stop when the government stops paying you in your 16-hour day. I have many cases of individuals who have had to have worked well past the 16-hour cutoff in order to protect themselves from wild animals or to perform other tasks and duties, and they have not even been shown the courtesy of being paid for the time, and the government has forced them into essentially grievance situations to try and get their pay. Why is it that this government will not respect the job that these trained professionals who have committed themselves to the province of Ontario, they can't even see their way through to paying them a decent wage? Quite frankly, it's disgraceful.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to take last call for final questions. Okay, I see no further questions. I'm going to pass it back to you, Marit.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Mark, for sharing here today. Really important. I got to tell you, and Lise and Sol, thanks for being here and for continuing to fight on the front lines there for better support for our forest fire workers. You know, it seems like the government is just once again making a choice here, right? It's not like the money isn't there. They're sitting on a $22 billion surplus right now. They have the money. It's what, a contingency fund for a rainy day? Well, guess what? The disaster is here. It's right here, right now. And continuing to underpay these very important workers, continuing to fail to provide them with the respect that they need, and even the danger pay. And, you know, putting us all, frankly, putting the entire province at great risk here, as well as those brave forest fire workers, is unacceptable. And I think, you know, I'm sitting here at Queen's Park. Folks in Southern Ontario have felt the impact of these forest fires, maybe in a way we hadn't in a long time. And so people are starting to talk about it down here. And so I would encourage everybody, not just in Northern Ontario, but everywhere across this province, to reach out to your MPPs and demand that this government, the Conservative government of Doug Ford, steps in and does the right thing here. We cannot continue to wait around till the disaster is upon us. It is upon us now. And this has, as I mentioned already, at August, you know, one of the worst wildfire seasons we've seen on record. It's outrageous, and it's only going to get worse. So again, we're looking for full-time jobs. We're looking for danger pay. We're looking for a government that values these workers. We need more permanent jobs. We need to make sure we can not only recruit forest fire workers, but retain them and all their experience. And we need this government to take climate change seriously. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.